BC Environment Minister Terry Lake joins us now. And before we get to Mr. Mulcair's supportive comments, or somewhat supportive comments, I want to ask you about this, Minister. Our government cannot support the issuance of a certificate for the pipeline as it was presented to the Joint Review Panel. Does that open the door for a discussion about actually seeing this project come to fruition?
Well, the environmental assessment process involves, if there is an approval, it would be a conditional approval. The National Energy Board put out 199 draft conditions, and we looked at those conditions. We cross-referenced them against the concerns that we had been, drawing out through the process. And it's still lacking. So what we're saying is, here's some ideas how to strengthen some of those conditions. Here's some additional conditions we think you should consider. So we don't want to prejudge what the National Energy Board does with those suggestions or suggestions from other interveners or participants. And we'll wait to the end of the year when they come up with their final decision. But at this point, it's certainly an uphill battle from everything we've seen in terms of saying yes to this project.
If you listen to what the people at Enbridge are saying, they're saying they want to sit down with the government and have a frank and open discussion and talk about what they could possibly do to make this happen. Is your government receptive to that?
Well, we've been in a process for the last year with Enbridge where we have asked them questions. We've talked with their experts. So they already know what our concerns are. So I'm not sure why they need to sit down with politicians when we have elucidated very carefully in different venues, whether it's Edmonton, Prince George, or Prince Rupert, and told them what our concerns are. The behavior of heavy oil in a cold marine environment, the lack of detail and response plans to very inaccessible parts of the province where this pipeline would traverse. So, I think they need to come up with those answers, or the National Energy Board needs to ensure that those answers are provided as part of any conditional approval.
What did you make of Mr. Mulcair's comments?
Well, I don't agree with what he says or what Mr. Dick says. The fact is that the process is working. We signed an equivalency agreement because we believe in one project, one process. Canadians expect to have their tax dollars spent wisely, to have an efficient, comprehensive, rigorous, transparent environmental assessment, and that's what this has been. There's been hours and hours and hours of cross-examination of testimony, of evidence, studies, and it shows, I think, with our submission that the system actually works. So we have pointed out to the Joint Review Panel the weaknesses of this proposal. So I don't agree with Mr. Mulcair. I think the system is working very well. It's just this particular project doesn't meet the grade as we see it.
Minister Lake, there are those that believe, primarily a province and a province or two east of you, that you're getting in the way of the economic well-being of other territories. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I, like many Canadians, look forward to a time when we're not dependent on fossil fuels, but we're not there yet. So we're not saying that we're against pipelines. We're saying we're against this pipeline. The information provided in the proposal simply does not provide enough assurances to British Columbia that the environment and the taxpayers will be protected. And so we're not saying no to pipelines. We're saying that the bar is set high, and this one, at this point in time, just simply can't get over that bar.
Is there any truth to the fact that it's just about a route change that would please people in the area, or is this about strictly environmental issues?
Well, we are pointing out the environmental concerns as well as some concerns around corporate structure and insurance that would come to play should there be an adverse event. So, it's a complex project, and we don't expect every last detail to be nailed down at this particular stage, but we do think that there should be more information about the response plans, given the type of terrain this pipeline would traverse. But also we need to understand this particular product and how it would behave in a cold marine environment. And there's a lot of controversy about that. The federal government is conducting some research, and I think those are the kinds of answers that we need to have before this project would receive support.
Minister Lake, I appreciate you taking time to speak with us today. Thanks for this.
You're very welcome.
That was BC Environment Minister Terry Lake.